It has been a while since I've sat down and talked to a camera. I've got alcohol. I've read some books. Gonna talk about some of that shit today. I'm gonna film several videos in advance, so pardon the fact that I have the same hair and shirt and sad face. Sorry. Today I wanted to talk about The Handmaid's Tale, especially knowing that the Hulu TV series is about to come out. I believe it comes out the 23rd, which is just a few days away from now. I had not read The Handmaid's Tale before this week, and it wasn't because it wasn't on my radar. I had heard about it. It's been on my Goodreads list to be read forever. And I didn't actually have a copy of it. I do have a copy of Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood, but not Handmaid's Tale. So I chose to use one of my Audible credits to buy the audiobook and listen to it that way. It's helped a bit to have an audiobook for me when I'm unable to sleep at night. Sometimes I listen to podcasts, but I do also listen to audiobooks, and Audible does have a function that allows me to set like a timer so that it doesn't just keep going forever and I miss the whole book. Once I fall asleep, I can like set like a 30-minute section or an hour section and just listen until it stops and fall asleep. Again, if you don't know, I do listen to audiobooks at 3 times speed, which means that I may be missing all of the key little nuances of certain things. I'm not, pouring over every single word and the sentence structure as I would oftentimes when physically reading a book. So the way that I take in the story is much more on the surface level. I'm getting the plot and the characters, less so focusing on the way that certain things are meant to make me feel. However, having watched the trailer and the making of little snippet that Hulu posted on YouTube of the new series, and also just thinking about it a little bit after I finished reading it, that I do have some thoughts on the structure and the way that things were set up in the sky. If you don't know, Handmaid's Tale is the story of a woman, in her own words, just after sort of the overthrowing of the world into this dystopian country. We know that she was in the United States, but it's no longer the United States, now it's Gilead. Women cannot have power, cannot have jobs, cannot own property, and in fact, in many ways, are owned by men or are identified by their relationship to specific men. This whole thing came about because infertility has become a problem. In common male factions, it's blamed on the women and not the men. There are fruitful women and there are barren women, and all men apparently are fruitful. The handmaids are women who have shown to have healthy offspring, and they are essentially rounded up and go through rigorous reprogramming, is what I'm going to use, psychiatric reprogramming, to become essentially just a vessel for one man's children when his wife is unable to bear children. While this book, as all dystopians are, is clearly a social commentary on the modern world, in this case 1980s, because the book came out I think in 1985, I'm not positive on that, but also just today in general, in the way that women are viewed by many people. The idea that you can't have an abortion because God made the baby, etc., etc. The idea that women's bodies are meant to be vehicles for children and nothing more. There's a lot of aspects of this book that paint men in very dark lights. Even the men that show compassion in some way don't actually feel in the same way that the women do, from what we can tell, at least those that Offred interacts with on a day-to-day basis. They might break the rules for their own gain, but they they do still agree with the way the world is moving for the most part. I'm not going to talk about the specific events of the novel. One thing I did want to talk about is the fact that our main character's name is Offred, which is broken down into of Fred, there's of George, and of Tom. You know, all of these girls have their names stripped away for them, and they're just of the first name of whatever man they've been given to, and once they give a child to one man, they get passed on to the next. That name gets taken, they get a new name. If a new one replaces them, they take on the name the other person had. Most people will be like, that's so rude, and like it's meant to exemplify this fact that women belong to the men, and this is how the wives take on the last names and the handmaids take on the first names. And that is part of it, stripping the identity away from these women. They are not their own objects. They are a purpose or an object of a man's. But the fact that the protagonist's name is Offred, and it's almost offered, as in she is offered to this man as an option, and the sort of way that she thinks and goes about her life, and how she is both a gift and a curse for every single person in that household, and outside of it that she interacts with. The ending of the book actually surprised me a little bit, because after The Handmaid's Tale ends, and I will talk about that and how ambiguous it is for the first part, and then there's this last chapter that is essentially some future scholar, even past this Gilead constructive world, is reading or listening to, because he says it was audio tapes, this tale and dissecting it as we would be dissecting the book itself. So it creates this weird meta narrative where we become like a third or fourth level removed from the actual story of this woman, because we are interpreting somebody's interpretation of a story that may or may not be true. It becomes watery, and we can no longer trust how much of it is real and how much isn't. The scholar in this case says that he could not trace back to her. He couldn't find any of her ancestors or any of her descendants. And we begin to wonder, as we do know that like certain aspects of this story are proper, how much did she change? How much did she disguise to protect herself and protect the others around her? Another aspect of this removing us and making us interpreting an interpretation perhaps suggests that that is not the point of the booklet. You shouldn't be interpreting this tale. You shouldn't be looking into it farther than there is, or perhaps it suggests that you should, that these people are simply using it as historical fact and looking at it in such a strange way, but not really looking at like the actual horrors of it. It could be a commentary on how now we look back at slavery and say it was bad, shouldn't do this, and you know, don't do that, it was bad, but you don't actually hear most of the time from somebody that was taking part in that, and you don't actually empathize with them, where this man at the end, very much in the same vein, wasn't empathizing with her. He was simply treating her in the same way as an object, that her tapes and her story was an object to be picked apart and used for his own scholarly gain. Now, Offred's ending to her own story is also a bit enigmatic. Throughout the story, we get the tale of the black vans, which are coming to take those who cannot follow the line or aren't suitable to be handmaids or suitable to be alive even in this regime of a world, away to then be hanged. A couple of men come to her house. She's about to get into the van, and a man that may or may not have betrayed her for money, we want to believe not, but could definitely have done the thing, tells her that it's okay, she's going to be fine, and the idea being that these tapes are found lets us believe that she doesn't get hanged, obviously, but it doesn't explain his role in this or how she gets away. It is literally just this moment of is she safe or is she not? And even knowing that she was able to tell this story after the fact doesn't really soothe you, and it still leaves you wondering how she made it out in the end. While I don't believe books need to tie in every single little thread that they leave hanging, in fact, when efforts are made to do that that seem over the top, I often get frustrated with it. I did feel a little dissatisfied with where exactly it ended. I feel like if it had ended slightly before or slightly after the point that it did, either her seeing the black van rolling up, or her getting to a point or talking with somebody that actually affirms her freedom, either more ambiguous or less, I would have, I think, enjoyed it more. But that doesn't detract from the fact that it was a very interesting ending, and especially the scholarly reflection on the story after the fact, giving you some sort of idea one way or the other how to interpret the story itself, was also interesting. Definitely look into checking out the TV show on Hulu. I myself am not a TV person. I have a hard time focusing for TV show lengths of time. It's a lot of commitment for me, and I become bored with it very quickly, and then I just never go back to it, even if I'm enjoying it. So I don't know if I'll be able to watch the whole thing, or if I'll even just, you know, watch a couple of episodes of it. It does look well, like put together, like the set design, the costume design looks really great. The actors they have in it are also very comparable in their fields. It will always be a question about whether or not they will be doing a very strict adaptation of the book, or whether they will add in their own twists and their own commentary that has more to do with 2017 than 1985. That's all I have for this video. Like I said, I'm going to be filming a bunch, and I'm going to be drinking alcohol, so they're probably all going to be falling apart. By the time we get to the very last one, I'm just going to be a mess, definitely. But I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you next time.